This is my third video in a series where I explore this alternate world where John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1946 and how that changes the Marvel Universe. Something I didn't get into before was characters getting older, and I'm getting older too. Marvel characters don't age at the same rate real people do. If they did, they'd eventually die, and Marvel would lose their golden goose. There's some passage of time called the sliding timeline, but it's significantly slower than ours. For the purposes of this world, I am ignoring the sliding timeline. If a character mentioned fighting in World War II, that's still a thing here. Why? Because the Fantastic Four not going to space and getting their powers is a crucial link in a chain that results in this world being so different. The space race is explicitly why they get their powers. Modern retellings of their origin don't mention a space race because that's connected to a specific era. But if I ignore a space race, I no longer have a crucial link in this chain. In addition to the things I've covered that are already different in this alternate timeline, we'll also have characters aging and participating in specific events in time like they were meant to when they were first introduced. Today, let's get into Iron Fist and my theory about the city of Kunlun that I'm sure nobody cares about. Iron Fist debuted in Marvel Premiere 15. Wendell Rand, his wife and son, and his business partner are in the Himalayas looking for the hidden city of Kunlun, which we're told in Marvel Premiere 16 only appears on Earth every 10 years. Danny's parents die, and he's taken in at Kunlun, where he spends a decade training so he can get revenge for his parents' death. As Danny is back on Earth in issue 16, which came out in 1974, I assume the issue takes place in 1974, which means Kunlun enters Earth in 1964, 54, 44, etc. The natives of Kunlun can choose to intersect with Earth at more frequent intervals, and I'm not sure if doing that would change the next date of intersection. But as we see no evidence of the people of Kunlun doing this, let's assume the city naturally appeared on Earth every 10 years in this ballpark. Iron Fist is one of my favorite Marvel characters, which is likely an unpopular thing to say, as the character is, to put it charitably, couched in some rather dated practices bordering on Orientalism and white savior syndrome. I'll give Danny a pass on the white savior thing, as he wasn't that interested in saving anyone, at least initially. All he cared about when he left Kunlun was getting revenge. It was only after he gave up on his vengeance that he basically said, okay, I guess I'll be a hero. The idea of a character from the West going to the mysterious Orient and learning some special power and returning home to use that power to fight evil is a little uncomfortable. I once heard someone succinctly say it like this: imagine someone leaves their home in Asia, goes to the mystical land of Texas to learn the mysterious art of gunfighting. Ridiculous, right? As ridiculous as Doctor Strange going to Asia to learn magic, or Iron Fist, or the Shadow, etc. This trope has kind of gone away in recent decades, maybe because the creators understand it's a little culturally insensitive, maybe because the world's gotten smaller in the last century. In the 1930s, the target demographic for the Shadow radio series were all almost certainly living in middle or lower class America, most of whom probably hadn't been on the other side of the world. Saying the Shadow learned long-lost magic in all these different places, that might as well have been another solar system for how far away it was for most of the listeners. But now, something could happen in Tokyo, and in 10 seconds, I could find out about it on my phone. There are no secret hidden parts of the world anymore. Why am I getting into this? Didn't I mention a theory about the city of Kunlun? Righto. So Marvel has not one, not two, but 3 hidden cities nestled somewhere in the Himalayas, and I think they're all connected. You have Kunlun, then you have Kamar-Taj, which is a little confusing. Depending on which issue you're reading, the Ancient One lives either somewhere in Tibet or in India. Close, but not the same place. And there's Kalahia, origin for the Thin Man, a little-known Marvel character introduced in Mystic Comics 4 in 1940. Bruce Dixon is in the Himalayas, where he discovers a hidden utopia. The Kalahians have the ability to make their bodies paper thin, and they give this ability to Dixon, which he uses to go into the world and fight evil. In Marvel Comics Presents 34, an older Dixon tells Captain America he went back to Kalahia after the war, only to find it had been destroyed by V2 rockets. Setting aside the aforementioned problems with hidden cities somewhere in Asia, I can buy one hidden city, especially if it only exists on our plane of existence one day per decade. But 3 separate hidden cities, all in the Himalayas, that's too much for me to swallow. There's this thing I hate, which one commenter called smallification, where you take previously unconnected elements and connect them, making a world feel smaller. At the risk of indulging in smallification, I find it much easier to swallow that 3 secret cities all in close proximity are somehow connected, rather than 3 unconnected secret cities all in the same region. I believe Kamar-Taj was a colony set up by the inhabitants from Kunlun to act as a sort of barrier between the people of Kunlun and Earth. Namor the Submariner, issue 24, Doctor Strange seems to know an awful lot about Kunlun and the alien Hillithri. Even if Danny Rand filled Strange in on his home off-screen, this doesn't seem like that. This seems like he's very knowledgeable about this city in another dimension. Incidentally, this issue has an example of smallification I don't like, where the Plant Man, a minor villain dating back to the 1960s, is revealed to have gotten his plant powers from from the Helithri. Even though, naturally, Kunlun only appears on Earth once a decade, there are ways to circumvent this, so perhaps the people of Kunlun wanted to make sure the people of Earth were safe. The dragon Chiantang is from Kunlun, and he's a real piece of work, so him or similar threats might have been what they had in mind when setting up this sister city on Earth. Thousands of years ago, when Kunlun intersected with Earth, some of the inhabitants stayed behind, sought out trustworthy parties they could work with to protect this plane of existence from threats from the other side. Or perhaps the people of Kunlun were less magnanimous. We know UT, the leader of Kunlun when Danny Rand was taken in, wasn't exactly a nice guy, so it's possible Kamar-Taj was set up to keep the disgusting Earthlings out of Kunlun. This makes more sense, as Kamar-Taj wasn't a city full of sorcerers. In the Ancient Ones flashback from Strange Tales 148, we're told of only 2 sorcerers. You don't need sorcerers to keep wayward travelers from getting too close to the dimensional gateway to Kunlun, while it would be difficult to expect regular muggles to protect Earth from interdimensional threats. Take your pick on the reason why, but I'm pretty sure Kamar-Taj was meant to be a protection for one side or the other, but over the millennia, the reason for the existence of Kamar-Taj was forgotten. Understandable with how infrequent communication between the cities would be. And if you're the UT back in Kunlun, you can spy on Earth, but even if you see Kamar-Taj has forgotten about Kunlun and can't guard the gateway when it opens, do you really want to send someone to Kamar-Taj to remind them of their duties? Things have gone pretty well these last few millennia. If we send someone to them, that risks exposure for us, so let's leave well enough alone. In the 14th century, Varna the Vampire gave power to Kalu, a sorcerer from Kamar-Taj. Kalu and his buddy Yao, who would later become the Ancient One, cast a spell over Kamar-Taj. Disease, poverty, and pain vanished. Later, when Kalu became more power-hungry, Yao confronted him, but Kalu sealed him up in a magic sphere, and this seems to have broken the spell they cast, as after some warlording, disease spread through Kamar-Taj, with only Yao safe in his magic bubble. In my previous video covering this alternate world, I mentioned Varna was killed centuries, maybe millennia before he got his hooks into Vlad the Impaler, so in this reality, he didn't give power to Kalu. When the disease began its work, Yao seems to think it's his fault, saying he upset the cosmic forces. So you might be tempted to say, in this reality, Kalu doesn't get secret knowledge from Varna, doesn't try to take over Kamar-Taj, so the people don't die from a mass pandemic. But, and I could be wrong, the way I see it, Yao is saying he messed with forces he shouldn't have messed with, and the extermination of the people of Kamar-Taj was supposed to happen, and when he and Kalu tried to eradicate disease, the higher forces of the universe pushed back, and it happened anyway at a later point in time. The people of Kamar-Taj must have had problems with disease before, otherwise these two wouldn't have cast a spell to get rid of disease. For whatever reason, the people of Kamar-Taj were supposed to die. Yao and Kalu merely delayed the inevitable. For that matter, maybe it was an enemy of Kunlun that knew of Kamar-Taj's connection to Kunlun, and they're responsible for the disease, but I don't know. We know Kunlun isn't as insular as we were meant to think when we were first introduced to Iron Fist. The previous Iron Fist before Danny Rand fought in the First World War. There was an Iron Fist who fought the British in 1860. Centuries ago, the Phoenix Force bonded with a citizen of Kunlun. Perhaps after the fall of Kamar-Taj, UT was somehow convinced it would be a good idea to set up another sister city on Earth, with the same responsibilities as fallen Kamar-Taj. Kalahia had advanced technology when Bruce Dixon visited, which makes sense as Kunlun's human founders were actually aliens who arrived on the Helithri homeworld in a spaceship. What we see in Kunlun, it doesn't look like a very technologically advanced civilization, but perhaps that's out of choice, and they didn't forget where they came from. Perhaps the UT thought this new colony needed to be better prepared for their duties, so he sent some advanced alien technology to establish Kalahia. Possibly even means of communicating with Kunlun, so the people of Kalahia don't forget their purpose like Kamar-Taj. By 1940, they're even communicating with citizens of Mars using the same technology. Not the same Martian species that invades Earth a few times over the course of a century, but it seems reasonable the Martian invaders found out about Earth because of this communication between Kalahia and this other Martian species. Way to go, guys. Agent Axis, a Nazi superhuman, wanted to turn Kalahia into his own personal kingdom when the war went sour. According to Thin Man, he used V-2 rockets to destroy Kalahia. V-2 rockets were used by Germany from 1944 to 1952. We're not told when Dixon tried to come back to Kalahia, but since he had a wife there, I assume he didn't linger once the war was over. I think we can pretty confidently narrow down Kalahia's destruction to 1944 or 45. I guess it depends on when Agent Axis saw the writing on the wall for the Nazis. But we're never told how Agent Axis found out about Kalahia. I believe he wasn't actually looking for Kalahia, but Kunlun. Kunlun appears on Earth every 10 years, and appeared in 1974, so it appeared in 1944. We know the Nazis had weird sci-fi tech, so perhaps when Kunlun emerged on Earth in 44, Agent Axis got a blip on his radar of a huge energy surge and was looking for the source. Instead of finding it, he found Kalahia. Did he find their method of communicating with Kunlun? It seems like he didn't, as the CIA eventually smuggled him into America. If he had anything useful useful about Kunlun, why would he settle for living in America? Maybe he didn't realize Kunlun only materializes every 10 years and gave up on his search. If that's the case, maybe he did have information on Kunlun and turned it over in exchange for immunity. Thin Man says he turned over information to be used against Russia, but he read that in a CIA file. Why would the CIA put something as juicy as a hidden mystical city in a file, even one that's ostensibly been declassified? And if the CIA knows about Kunlun, what are they planning to do with this information? Have they given up looking for it like Agent Axis did? We like to think the CIA are the good guys, but I'm sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face with that one. If the US government has untoward intentions in regards to Kunlun, that would put Iron Fist in an awkward position. Does he stand with his adopted city or with his place of birth?
A good question for another time.
Yeah, sorry, that's going to be where we'll stop for now. But trust me, every time I do one of these videos, I get really invested in where all I can explore. So I promise you, it hurts me as much as it hurts you to leave you hanging here. Where will we go next time I explore this alternate world? I don't know, but when I find out, you'll find out soon after. Until then, have a good one.